Hey y'all. Hey everybody, and welcome to the Octavia Butler mixtape course. Dr. Brianna Whiteside, and today we are wrapping up Butler's Clay's Arc, which is the fourth book of the series. But yeah, some people say they like it, some people don't. But I'm super excited to chat about it. As you come on, please like the post, like the video. That's what I want to say. Like the video so the algorithm can push it out. If you want to chat about this book, feel free to hop on up here. So we can talk about it. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm sure we have a lot to talk about. Of course, this is one of the texts that does not have a lot of scholarship, and I think it's for obvious reasons as to why, but we've made it. We have one more book for the parable series, before the parable series, which is Pattern Master. And yeah, you all would have read her entire Patternist series so that you will be ready. If you wanted to read the parable series, you will understand the world that you are stepping into. Also, I don't know if y'all saw the Substack that I posted the other day about Butler nodding to the universe that it's, or to the world that's happening in the parable series. Did y'all catch that reference in Clay's Arc? I want to pull it up just in case people didn't get to see it. To let you know that she was always thinking about her next series, right? And so my argument stands, all of her work is interconnected. But I want to read that. I want to read that moment in Clay's Arc as we wait for more people to hop on. And of course, y'all, if y'all want to come up here and chat about it, share your thoughts about it, go ahead and click the little two people at the bottom so that you can come on up and keep with us tonight. All right, so here's the nod to the parable universe. If you are reading out of the Seed to Harvest book, y'all know my book all toe on up. But if you are reading out of that, it is on page 583. And if you're not reading out of that book, it is in chapter 23, so past 23. And it says others, including Clay Dana himself, saw it as a way to the stars. And this is a reference to when Butler's talking about Clay selling his technology or his power to NASA. It says they had clearly feared the turn of the century irrationality, religious overzealousness on one side, destructive hedonism on the other, with both heated by ideological intolerance and corporate greed. You ultimately see that in Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents. It says the Dana faction feared humanity would extinguish itself from Earth. What does Lawrence say? The destiny of Earthseed is to do what? Take root among the stars. Right? And it says the only world in the solar system that could support human life. Okay, so yeah, so if you're reading this, Butler is preparing you for the world in Pattern Master, which we're going to read next, but also to understand how we got into this destructive moment when we step into Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents. But also at the end of Parable of the Talents, you know that they do start launching ships into space, right? But then you also learn via Lilith and Dawn that the earth did become inhabitable, and people were afraid, and there were all of this over religious zealousness that we see happening in the Parable series. And so I really try, as an independent Butler scholar, I really try to grade these narratives for you, because on first glance you will miss it. On second glance, sometimes people miss it. But because I've read it over and over again, I've been thinking about it over and over since 2013. I don't want you to miss it. So I just wanted to let y'all know, just in case people, felt that they missed it. And I'm curious, do y'all still feel like this is a standalone book? Like, I know last week people were saying this feels out of place. This feels like it can stand alone. Like, do y'all still feel that way after reading it? I'm so interested. But I'm also interested in if you're going to feel that way once we get to Pattern Master. I know people said that they wanted, someone said on the Substack that they wanted to see what the clay ark children would look like. You're about to meet them in the next book. Okay. So don't worry. You're going to see what Jacob and his kind become in Pattern Master. All right. And that is the book that kind of ends the series, which is also the first book that Butler ever wrote. Sir Maxim says, yeah, still feel stand alone. I think one of the reasons, and I was thinking about this, one reason why these books can feel standalone-ish, well, it's because, and this is one of the reasons for that, is because Butler was literally writing her way backwards from Pattern Master. So Pattern Master was the first book, and she's literally trying to chart her way backwards, but not in order as we would think she would move backwards, but she's like publishing backwards to kind of start braiding the narrative forward. And so I'm wondering if that was kind of created some distance between the other books. We also know that she was writing all of the books at the same time. Even fragments of the Parable series show up during this time as she's writing the Pattern Master series, and they show up in her archive. And so she's writing so many stories at one time, and then she starts to try to create worlds around it. But just a plug for next week, Pattern Master is the first book. Teray was her boyfriend in her head, as she says in several interviews. He lived in her head for a long time before she wrote about him. And yeah, that's all I got. That's all I got. So Benji's mom says, how did Lauren survive without getting the clay ark disease in the Parable books? Okay, as you notice, y'all, there are multiple storylines happening in one universe. So that's kind of like, how did some people not get COVID in the world of COVID, right? How did some people not get infected with the 1-9, but others did? But you also see the characters in this text, like, what's his name? Badger. His clan did not contract the disease, but they were doing stuff that made you feel like, okay, maybe they have the disease. No, they were human. They were rat packs. They were the lowest in society in a way, right? And so you can live in a world and not feel the impact of the disease, but ultimately feel the impact of the disease on the world. Does that make sense? You can live in a world where people are contracting a disease or an illness, and you not contracted in your body, but you can feel the effects of it in the world. I hope that makes sense. Okay. All right, y'all. All right. Anybody else want to hop up here? I see some people saying, I don't like this book. It wasn't my favorite one. And that's fine. That's fine. Ultimately, I think the reason why we had to have Clay's arc is because if you got to Pattern Master and you started seeing Jacobs running around in the world, you would say, how the heck did we get from Minding My Mind to Pattern Master, right? How do we get from the telepaths to these Sphinx-like characters, right? So I think the reason why we had to have Clay's arc is because when Butler was writing Pattern Master, the first book of the series, she wrote the war between the telepaths and the Clay arcs. She had to give you their backstory, like she had to give you the backstory about them in Minding My Mind. And then as a result of Minding My Mind, she had to give you the backstory about Doro's breeding program in Wild Seed. So it's a tough read. I ain't gonna hold you. I don't think it's any tougher to read than the Parable of the Sower. But I'm interested in what y'all think. All right, panel. Hey, panel.
Hey.
How y'all doing? Happy Wednesday. Of course, y'all, if y'all want to come up, just click the two people at the bottom. Let's go. How y'all feeling about this?
I feel you know what? I read Clay's arc so fast. It was so fast. Like, I think I completed it Thursday or something, which then forced me to have to read other books. So that's a whole different story on my part. But what I thought was, I know we were like on the Hey Doro stand thing or whatever, and I realized and I realized I hated the father,
Okay, Blake.
Blake. I hated him. I realized like halfway through when I was reading the second half of this, I was like, you just could not, like, I understand the need to want to get away, or like they kidnapped you or whatever else, but when you realize, hey, I'm starting to become attracted to this woman, or I know I have this disease and all the rest of it, and just felt like I'm just going to ignore everything somebody is saying to you, and I'm going to do this. And now you put that out on the world, because basically the disease is spread now because the trucker got it. It's done. It's done. It's over with. It's
Yeah.
going to be everywhere. And then, they talked about how it was everywhere. I don't know. Yeah, I realized at that point I wasn't feeling like who's going to be my next, standing on Doro hate. But I got serious Blake hate right now. I'm just like, why would you do that? Like, it just seemed, I understand the need, but dude, you clearly see, like you admit to yourself there is something wrong and there is a disease, and they have told you that the astronaut wife is a medical, like, she is an expert,
Yeah.
and she couldn't get rid of this thing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I'm wondering. I mean, I don't. Ultimately, of course, I don't think we supposed to like him. You know what I'm saying? But I also think I wonder if we're looking at the arrogance of intellectualism, right? Blake, Eric, Eli, and them told him, "Hey, this is the issue. This is what we're up against." And Blake's like, "Nah, I'm a doctor. We're gonna get y'all to a lab. We're gonna do this. We're gonna do that." And it was the arrogance of the intellectuals. Because generally, get this, y'all know when they talking about the recession and all this other stuff, it's not the people at the bottom that's not going to be able to survive because they've already had to learn how to survive. Generally, it's the upper class folks that struggle the most. Not saying it doesn't touch the lower class, but they've already learned survival skills. Now you're getting Blake entering a white heterosexual man, married to a black woman, has biracial children, and yeah, I want to talk about that one. And then he's entering into a world that does not privilege his classism. It doesn't privilege him. And because it doesn't privilege him, he's struggling under the weight of being the other here, right? He's other in this community. But I don't even think it was him necessarily, oh, concerned about the world. It could be, I'm concerned about my socioeconomic place in this world, and I want to ensure that others like me are still able to stay on the top. And the only reason I bring that up is because of all the racial undertones that are in this book, right? So I'm glad we don't have a replacement for the Doro hate train, even though somebody will probably try to blame him for this one too.
So, well, for me, I am glad that I didn't read this book during COVID. I would not have made it through COVID if
Yeah.
I had read this book. Actually, that my first time reading Butler was Parable of the Sower during COVID, and I put it down and I could not pick up Talents after. I still haven't picked it up, but I definitely when I read books, even if they don't have a quote unquote happy ending, I look for books that have some semblance of hope and light in the end. And there was none in this. So it just felt really chaotic and really hopeless at the end for me. And yeah, I'm glad I didn't read it during COVID.
Well,
It was a difficult read. It was quick, but it was difficult. I really, really felt Blake was just selfish. He thought he knew more than the people who actually had lived experience, and that his hubris ended up causing this catastrophe that where Eli had the issue somewhat contained, the organisms somewhat contained within their little compound. He came in with his I know more than you, I am a doctor, there has to be a cure, and ended up being the cause of this, what looks to be worldwide spread of this disease. So yeah, it was difficult for me.
Well, I wonder, you mentioned there wasn't any hope. I wonder if the hope was that the next generation of children will be able to live. And Kira, she was getting rid of her leukemia. She was healthy. She survived when she was, she has a chance at life because of this organism. So, like, can we, no?
That's individual individuals over the collective. That dichotomy to me just doesn't feel. Yes, she's being cured of her leukemia, but only in service of this organism. And then the collective there's a bigger impact than just individuals being cured of cancer. For me, the collective is going to suffer.
But okay, so in the Substack, and this is not even a pushback against you, but this is something that I was thinking about too. The book is about change. And those, in my mind, right? And those who are resistant to change are the ones who are going to suffer. And I
Okay, Lauren. Lauren,
oh,
God, the only God is change. Change is God. God is
right,
change.
right. And so if you will not adapt, even if it's forced adaptation, you may not make it. And I think in a world where so many people are refusing today to change, to evolve, I wonder if that leads to the destruction as a result.
But to me, it's almost like they're devolving, not necessarily evolving, because there's it's so how they present is so antithetical to what we know humanity to be.
Which day?
They're eating raw, killing animals, eating raw flesh, just like animals in the wild. They're lusting after their children. That blew my that literally blew my mind. When I read the part of how Blake was attracted to Kira and Kira was attracted to him. It
Yeah,
felt sickening to
that's
me.
an organism.
Yeah, right. So it's the organism acting through them, but I don't evolving, yes, and changing, yes, but evolving to to me, a less human version of a person. So I don't know.
Yeah, no. I think that that's a good tension that you're picking up on because, yes, everything you just mentioned is brutal and it's bad and it's horrible. But then I think about Badger and his people who were not
True.
impacted, right? But they were some horrible people too.
Right.
Right? They were gang ring these people and they were doing all of these things to them un like not driven by the organism. So even their humanity, and I said this like last week, that Butler wanted to write about the darkest parts of humanity. Like, what will you do if you're forced into survival and the humanistic or the animalistic side of you pops up? What you're going to do? How are you going to act? And so I think that it is just bad all the way around. But I also think when I'm thinking about the last line, think about the children. Consider the children, consider the future. These will be the future of society. Then I think about change and adaptation and how, what we once knew or thought as human or as right always gets challenged. I don't know. But thank you for bringing that up. Thank you. Anybody else want to go?
And I don't know if I can be heard.
You can be heard.
Okay, sorry. Um, I'm a retired RN, and I think what came to me about Blake was a lot of the arrogance and medical enculturation that I experienced as a nurse, mentoring new grad nurses, coaching nurses in managing heated exchanges, the power dynamics. So I'm looking at him going, oh yeah, there's not all doctors are like this, thank God.
Yeah.
But in the hospital I worked in, it was it wasn't as diverse as other hospitals in my area, and I was very aware of that. And so, yeah, the medical model is very, at times to me, it appeared cruel. How they would treat each other, what they felt they could get away with. I heard stories of surgeons being angry about the way things were lined up, picking up an instrument and hurling it at an RN in the surgical site. Yeah, there's stories. So the other thing that came to me is Blake's arrogance and the medical world inflaming that even further as a white man. And then I wondered also, what impact Octavia experienced watching someone she cared for being being so vulnerable and dependent on such a hierarchical white supremacist vibe, world that medicine is. I mean, I saw nurses mistreat sickle cell patients in 2000. And I never had a problem with them because I knew that the other white girls were like being bitches. They were being nasty. I never had a problem with those girls. I always chose them, the ones that were suffering from sickle cell.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of the hierarchical white supremacist vibe in that. And I wonder how Octavia felt in watching someone she cared for being so vulnerable to that.
I think that's probably why Blake is like he is. And if you all don't know what Benji's mom is referring to, someone had emailed me and asked who Phyllis was. And if you read, if you have a physical copy of the book, it says to Phyllis at the beginning, or she dedicates the book to Phyllis. And Phyllis was her friend. Oh, it says in memory of Phyllis White. And Phyllis was her friend who was dying of cancer in the hospital. And Butler was already thinking about ways that she could write about cancer, but make it sexy, but also make it not depressing. Like she was, towing this line. And she did not want to ultimately let her friend read this book because she was in the hospital dying of cancer. But her friend wanted her to. And her friend gave this feedback to her as she was writing this book. And she was one of the first people to lay eyes on the book. And they had discourse back and forth about this book. And so if Butler was deeply involved in her medical care and, her time in the hospital, I can see why Blake was written the way that he was written. I can see that.
Especially if her friend was a marginalized person,
Oh, yeah.
a black woman or somebody from another culture, because that's pretty heavy in there. Also, AML, acute myelocytic leukemia. That's such a tough one. I lost many. I was in the oncology department in the bone marrow transplant. And yeah, the journey of accompanying someone to the premature end of their life, I've considered that sacred. Yeah, that's a very weighty experience, one to be served with honor, but not all physicians and healthcare providers do that.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's tough. Thank you. Mais, you wanna, or Christy?
Hi.
Hey, I saw you in the chat.
Yes, I didn't like the book, but to go with the same vein of what everyone is talking about, I think Octavia pointed out what I found was interesting that she pointed out that race was still an issue so far in the future. Oh, this is your father? They have a white father, they're biracial. That was still an issue. And we're talking about some time way past Mind of My Mind. And then when they encounter the children, Jacob, and their physical differences, um, that already prejudice that's ingrained in our society just transfers over, right? And then Blake acts the way he acts, and his daughter acts the way I do not like those two characters. Um, but it's interesting because you guys were talking about what makes you human, right? And the animalistic qualities of these new children that are coming about. But humans are also a part of the animal kingdom. We're just at the top, right? We have what separates us is our mental capacity.
Mhm.
And so I think she was just showing us that if we continue to separate ourselves by our physical differences, what makes us different from one another, we're going to continue to walk into our own destruction. Because at the end, in order to survive,
Mhm.
you must adapt,
Mhm.
right? You must adapt. And that means that sometimes we're going to look different and we're going to sound different, right? But what remains is the genetic makeup.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay. As a black woman, I can give birth to a white kid. She may not look like me in skin color, but my genetics is there, right? We
Yeah.
have to accept that in order to evolve, we have to adapt.
Yeah.
And when someone is different, that does not make them less human. That does Humanity is defined by us.
Mhm.
It has not been defined before us. We make these definitions. And so I think she was talking about that in this book, um, by introducing these new uh, mutants and stuff. But overall, book is a 1 out of 10 for me. Didn't like Blake. Didn't like his daughter Rain. Really didn't like her. It was very fast paced, very violent. And yes, I read Parables, and Parable was a little bit different. This was teen too much. This was a lot.
Girl.
Listen, that last scene in the kitchen had me. I was like, oh no, this needs to end now.
So wait a minute. So I understand the last scene, but when I was reading this, there were references to parable solar and talents, and they mentioned these collars, right? And we know that in parable of talents, they have slave they got choke chains on, slave shock collars in a way. But one, you think this was more brutal than solar and talents?
It's different. It's
Okay.
different because this was upfront, very fast paced. All of this is happening in a short amount of time, and the violence is just ongoing, right? In Parable, we have a long stretch of time, and when the brutality is happening in that series, not all of it is as detailed as it was in this book in certain parts. I'm not
Okay.
saying all parts. I read Parable in January for the second time in certain parts, and also it was the sexual violence too.
Wait, you read talents or solar?
I read the first one.
Okay, I'm referring to talents.
Okay, I didn't read Talents yet, but the first one I read, and
Okay,
so it was different, and also the sexual violence. It was just a lot,
it
and the
was a
girls
lot
were
for sure.
16. They were 16, and it was a lot going on here. It was a lot going on, and Blake, for someone who's about to lose a child, the decision making just wasn't there. You didn't think this out because your child knew that this was her chance
Mm-hmm.
to possibly keep going,
Mm-hmm.
and you just making all the wrong choices. It was bad. I don't know. I love Survivor, by the way, but this wasn't it for me.
No, I totally get that. And I think that sometimes if it's not in our face, we don't have to deal with it. Like we know that trafficking is bad, but until you come upon that in your face part of trafficking, like you can't look away, you're like, it's a shock, right? It's in your face. And I think that, Butler is putting things in our face. Now, mind y'all, this is written in 84. It's taking place in 2021. So we have covered a lot of ground. And she is putting these things in your face that we're still struggling against and still fighting against. But ultimately, I think that it also causes us to ask ourselves or to consider we probably a few decisions and pandemics away from a society like this. I do think so. The haves and the have nots. And I don't think that we have in our time been that close to this moment as we are now.
So, because you don't like Star Trek and you probably don't get this reference, I'm gonna start off by saying one of the things about Star Trek is that when Star Trek was right, like in some of the episodes, they always had this stuff, when things happen, like the third civil worldwide war and World War III and all of that kind of stuff happening. It all happens about now.
Mm.
So
How'd
they,
you keep had your wife?
so they all happen about now. And so there's something called sanctuary cities
Mm.
where they were saying you had all of these, and sanctuary cities reminded me so much of parables because it was basically supposed to be these walled off communities where people who were poor, they were not criminals, they were supposed to be just poor, had some place to go until they could get themselves jobs or something. And all the rich people, people who had money or had esteem or whatever else, they lived in the part of the city that wasn't there. And so some of the writing in this book and also in parables reminded me of that. So I think I don't want to say a trope, but there's so much around, so many other science fiction or speculative fiction writers where it's near future. And the near future always looks horrible. It just always looks horrible, and race is never over. Racism is never over, never like gotten rid of. Even in talks about like species or other kind of stuff, it just doesn't happen. It just always stays there. And that was something about Octavia Butler's writing and all of her books, is that that's constantly there. That is an element of what's happening. It plays into, so it's not just this horrific thing that's happening. It's also this racism and this thing against women that's happening. It's one of the reasons I like her book so much, is that the perspective doesn't just stop at the normal trope, which is mankind. No, it's women are getting crapped on or have to be leaders, and black people are still in a situation fighting for equality.
I see. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. I agree with everything that y'all saying. It is hard. It's tough. I've heard people refer to Texas as a sanctuary state recently, and I don't think I realized that was something that. Well, of course I didn't realize because I don't watch Star Wars, Star Trek. But that idea, that concept of people referring to certain states now as sanctuary places is scary.
Right. And when you have, just so it just reminds me. So him being off in this Eli in this compound, and all of this kind of stuff, trying to keep it from there, and knowing that this virus or disease is going to spread across the world, you are forcing people into that kind of have and have nots, with or without kind of scenario. They pray.
And I think also, yes, to what you're saying, then we're going to get to Christy and Sir Maxim. But I also think that we were already in that have and have not part anyway, right? Because when we enter into this book, we have the sewer rats, we have people behind wall communities. Like, we have all of these have and have not markers, or these markers of wealth, or privilege. And then we meet the clay arcs, who are developing in the desert, right outside of Needles. And so we already have this nation divided, but it's only going to get worse, according to, let me not say that. Christy, hey. Uh-oh.
Oh, hey.
Okay.
Sorry, couldn't get my mic off mute. Um, so I have to say, it was brutal. The book was brutal. But I did like it.
Okay.
And I think I like all books, no matter how brutal. Um, I look at it as knowledge. Um, and to be able to see some of the things, and I'm reading the chat as we're talking, to be able to see like a lot of these things happening now with haves and have nots, and like, do we need to leave? Where do we need to go? Like, I don't know, just all these things. I was glad about. Okay, three things. I am on a hate train. It's my first hate train. I was just kind of like, Doro's a character. Like, I could see where people hated him, but I wasn't really there. But Blake, oh no, no, I could not stand him. Just for the fact that he had these 16-year-old girls out in the desert going along thinking he knows more. Then when he gets to the compound and they're like, he sees all of the evidence, he sees all of the people that have this organism, this disease, he doesn't know what they're all saying. They're telling him the same thing, and he still runs. And at the end, he's like, "Oh, I hope my kids can forgive me because he's going to leave them with this biker gang." Like, what the, like, at least, I if he's going to run away, um and for the, I guess, the benefit of his children is the only reason I would think that he would run away. Like, if I think about leaving the country, I think about it for my children. I want to protect them. So I can see that with him. But then at the very end, he was like, "Oh, I hope they understand that I've left them. I hope they're okay." So that was where I was like, "Oh no, that was just my, I guess, mom. You've really done it now. Like, I'm completely done with you." But I didn't like his daughter either.
Rain.
Rain. Just that she saw what was happening. She felt what was happening with her body. And she was like, "No, I think I'm just going to try to escape too." That just kind of threw me. I did not expect his daughter to, I thought both of the daughters would make it out.
Okay.
Um, I am glad that I saw the connection with Parable. I'm glad that I actually read, that was my very first book, was Parable of the Sower.
Oh.
And I stopped. I would have read Talents next, but I discovered you.
Okay.
And I discovered you like right after Parable of the Sower, and you were starting this, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to stop
Okay.
and start. But anyway, I'm glad that I, could kind of see that. And when you started writing on Substack this week, I'm like, oh, I did. And when I continued reading, and one last thing. Oh, last week I brought up, I wish that they had tied Clay Dana to this more. And then when I'm reading the second part that I hadn't gotten to, I was like, oh,
There you go.
you did a really good job of kind of keeping a poker face with me and not saying like, oh, well, that's going to come up, because I thought, oh, she did a good job of that. I'm not saying, well, it's going to get, better with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those were some of my thoughts. I mean, I'm sure I have 12 other thoughts,
Sure.
because when I start talking, I forget all of my words. I'm not the best.
Yeah.
I stumble over my words.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. So for a few things that I want to respond to, you mentioned his attitude, right? You didn't like him. You didn't like how he was. But I also want us to think about why Butler is setting this up to where the two most privileged people, well, the privileged family, only one person makes it out of the privileged family. And ultimately, sometimes people with privilege think that their socioeconomic backgrounds will save them. Your defenses won't save you. Your money won't save you. And so I think the reason why Kira made it was because she was already disadvantaged, right? Rain had not only the being beautiful, and also her daddy's money, right? So she could talk jazzy and have that arrogant attitude because she's that close to whiteness, and she's a healthy body. But then we have Kira, who is the weakest, who was once beautiful. I think the text said, they're not my words, but Butler's words, but she's disadvantaged. and she's not expected to make it. So of course she's going to relate more to the disadvantaged. Also, I want to talk about the history of, no shade, Christy, white folks not taking care of their children during enslavement.
Oh, none taken.
During enslavement, right? So I think that your maternal instinct is like, no, take care of the kids. We have to save the kids. Sure, our modern attitude, but Black folks took care of the kids of the plantation holder. So Blake may not have had that, and this is not to, take up for him at all. But as you were speaking, I thought about that. Like, they did not have that type of emotional connection to the children. It was always the handmaids or the mammy or the Black folks who were, supposed to be their wet nurses. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. All of those, but points taken. Points taken.
Oh, yeah. Points taken with you, too.
All right, Sir Maxim. Hey, welcome back.
Hey, yeah. I think I've said this before. I always listen to these while I'm at the gym, so I stepped aside. So I might get off here, but still be listening later. So, but I really just wanted to say, because what y'all were saying at the start, Shernati and you guys, everyone just talking about like just how uncomfortable it was and how it just felt like so like disturbing. Especially, I was really thinking, and I've been known to see metaphors where there aren't metaphors for things, so I could totally I might be thinking way too much about this, but like so when I was in Bible school, I was in Bible school, like I remember hearing that like the flood was like, it was like this punishment in order to like cleanse the earth, quote unquote, of all the things that humanity had done wrong or something. Like that's like how some people phrased it. And I was weirdly thinking about that a lot. I was like, in a way, I mean, this is like a disease that comes from the sky. So like it's almost to someone, it might even look like almost like a divine punishment to humanity, that it kind of like it destroys and really ultimately eliminates all the people who have just benefited off of capitalism so much. Like at the end, we're hearing about all these cities like New York, San Francisco, and the actual sanctuary outside of Needles with all the first victims. It's a group of people who look out for each other, who live off the land, who eat raw meat. As far as we know, it's really diverse, and I could be wrong about this. I don't remember there really being any like racism among them, among like all of they were all like, look, this is who we are, and it almost made me think like, in a way, this disease is kind of maybe Butler saying like sometimes we have to be really, maybe we've just gone too far with capitalism and now we're like at each other's throats all the time. But it's like, if we just regressed back to those like instinctual things that make us human in each other, we won't have time to beat each other's throats because we're looking out for each other. And also we see that like they're literally, I know the virus is making them do some really bad things sexually. That's not great. And that was really disturbing to read. In another way, like there is kind of a sense of free love among them. Like Eli's the father of several children, and there's not this like strict maybe like religious standards of monogamy and all these restrictive things. It just feels like so many of these things that society has like held up for centuries are not innate to us. What's innate is food and community and stuff like that, and shelter with each other. And ultimately, like Blake and Rainey, the ones who resisted it so much, who were like trying to get away, they were the ones who died. And Kira, who resisted it, but also we could tell from the start she was a bit more curious about it, I feel. And like Eli, she was more open to change. Because she was open to that change and adaptation, ultimately she lives. And so that's kind of what I was getting from it by the end. Like Butler is saying, if you want to live, you have to change. Yeah. And we do see that with the seed religion and parable. It's like what you change changes you. These microbes literally talk to each other. Like Eli was saying, that they literally change each other when they touch each other. And so, I think Butler's like, you better adapt or you're going to die. And that's my rant. But yeah, Blake is not my guy. Do not like Blake.
Yeah, and I think that to your point about them knowing more about like community and things like that, like there was a passing reference or a comment that I think Eli said, we know more about community than y'all do behind
Yeah,
those walled cities. You know what I'm saying? And so
totally.
while you may think that the wall is going to protect you, you all know nothing about communal support because everyone is just kind of still looking out for themselves. Whereas Eli's crew and arguably a little bit Badger's crew, this is our community. We have to protect the unit type.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
But I do
maybe
like that cleansing of the earth reference you gave.
yeah, like I don't think maybe Butler's saying like there needs to be some cleanse. I think it's just like when this happens, what's gonna happen to you? Like how are you gonna react to it? Kind of similar to like Kindred, you don't know what you would do until you're literally there. And so
Yeah.
you better be ready, in that kind of thing.
And I saw this in the chat, but to the point of changing, I think that we see the Jacobs and we see them budding here in this book, and then we're going to see them more in Pattern Master. But this sets you up for the Xenogenesis trilogy, where there are connections and intermingling. And so she kind of gave you a little bit of it in Survivor when not Lauren, Elena has the baby, the hybrid baby. And then you see it more so in your face here. You're going to see it more in Pattern Master. But when you get to the Xenogenesis trilogy, more specifically, the End of Dawn, all of Adulthood Rights, and Imago, you're going to see that the sacred image that the missionaries were trying to preserve of humanity is completely done away with. And so I don't know what that may mean for us. Like, you know what I'm saying, today, but also understand, y'all remember, Butler ran on this theory about the human contradiction, that your hierarchical nature and your intelligence, those two things cannot coexist. You're going to have to choose one. And generally her argument is that intelligence is relatively new, while hierarchy is an old thing. And so you're going to bend to hierarchy every time. So
Yeah. All right. Back on the treadmill, y'all. See y'all.
have a good workout. Okay. Melu, tell me, how you say your name, girl? Welcome back, by the way. Mel, you up here? Uh-oh, it says you got bad service. Can you hear us? Oh, no. Tai Chi, while we wait for her. Hey. No, we can't hear you.
I'm not I'm unmuted, right? You can hear
Yeah,
me?
I can hear you, Tai Chi.
We can't hear you.
No. You can't hear me?
No, I can hear y'all. I'm
Okay,
saying that we can hear Malo.
Malo.
We can't
That's
hear.
okay. We can't hear you, girl.
That's how I pronounce it. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right either.
She gonna
So
tell
I
us
don't
when
know.
she get up here. She gonna tell us,
Okay.
hey, Dr. Williams. She gonna tell us when she get up here.
Okay. My whole thing is again thinking from a different perspective. Like, yeah, this is a virus and this is cool. And I love the biochem of it all that other stuff. But I can't help but see Doro. I'm sorry. He told us. Okay, hold on. I'm about to make it click for you.
Okay.
Let me cook.
Go ahead.
I remember in the beginning, Anyamu was very, very against incest.
Yes.
Very, very against incest. Oh my God, this, that, and the third. This is an abomination. We can't do it. He kept telling her, your notions will change. Like this will change. This will become like your new norm. He'd laugh and he'd be like, yeah, okay, that's cute. This will change.
Yeah.
Years and eons later, this is what we're still doing. And this is now kind of going to be everybody's norm. And yes, this is a virus now. I just feel like he coming back around. This whole entire notion is just coming back around. And it's just like now it's something that you have to do, you want to do, you're forced to do. Whereas before, like the pattern was making you do it. That like there was always something to kind of blame it on. Now we got a virus to blame it on. There's just like a lot of, I don't know. I'm following the Easter eggs, and I feel like it's just him coming back around. I'm so sorry. Like
No,
Yes, I acknowledge the virus. I acknowledge that this thing is happening. It's making them lose weight, this, that, and the third. But in terms of their tendencies, in terms of like, he's been echoing this, like our notions and our perceptions are going to change. You have to be able to adapt because this is happening. You're going to change your views about what you think about things very, very soon because this is what's happening. And then we had the patternist one. Being super closely related and then pairing with each other. Then we had them making other people pair with each other. Now we have a virus making people pair with each other that aren't technically supposed to be together.
Okay, let me ask you this, and this is for anybody. So I hear you, I see that, but they only want to do this in that transitional phase, right? In the middle, they only want to commit incest, from what I understood in the text, before they fully become a clay ark. Because even Eli said, "You're dangerous here. You're not fully one of us." Once they fully transition, from what I understand, they no longer have those inclinations. So could it be that the deepest, darkest parts of humanity is rising to the surface as the clay art organism is fully taken hold?
It could be. It could also, but they still have these tendencies in that, like, okay, all three of y'all are sisters, right? And I'm the one here, but this organism is kind of like, okay, well, I don't mind sharing him with all of my sisters. Kind of like a lot in his girls. Like it was a thing out of necessity. That wouldn't necessarily cross our minds, without the organisms, I don't think. I don't know.
Like the polygamous nature?
No, not polygamy and polyamory and all that stuff, but in like me and my sister being together, sharing a guy, as opposed to me and a stranger, like me, so like a random, lady, and being like, okay, let's go ahead. Like he's still keeping it in the family until he found them a pair.
Yeah.
And he still understood it until he found them a pair. So I'm just like, okay, cool, sure, all right, we'll see. So it could be, what you're saying, exposing the deepest, darkest parts of humanity. But I just like what he was saying way back in the first book is still echoing and ringing true now to this book. And it doesn't matter what the host is or who's controlling what, like it's still resonating. And I found that interesting. I also like talked in the Substack a little bit about how these need to have trigger warnings because it was just a jump scare all around. These need to have trigger warnings. But I wasn't as upset and riled by it, which says something. Desensitization is real, but I wasn't like as like jarred to which did bother me a little bit. But like I get why other people are just like, yeah, I cannot with this book. I do not like this book. Unfortunately. And so I get that. And then also, I think I talked about last week that we always look at the perspectives of the quote unquote pure forms. Like, okay, the fact that, you're fully human and nothing else, or you're fully white and nothing else, and fully black and nothing else. And we never considered the hybrids or the mixed races. Or the mixed, I guess, species that come out of it and how they and their anxieties and like what they kind of deal with. And then we get a little bit of what Jacob was doing, how he was repelling from Eli because he could sense the fact that Eli was not comfortable looking him in the face. And then he stopped coming to him altogether after a while. And it's kind of shaping how he feels about fully human people. And he's always on the defensive to be like, well, I don't like this person, or like to run for cover because that first experience with his own father. So that was made manifest, and I was just interested in how that is going to carry on further as they become the majority, and what that's going to look like for the quote unquote pure sides, and how they're going to deal with being othered from a, I guess, minority standpoint. But yeah, I like the fact that she gave it a little nudge and she shone a little light to, what was going on within the own, campgrounds. Because we were just like, it was so diverse and everybody's so tolerant on the campgrounds. Like, yeah, but he didn't like his son.
Yeah, and I think that that's because of the roots he had in the missionary culture, right? Like, remember their image or their mission was to preserve the sacred image of humanity, and now you have a child who is not in that image, and you're repulsed by it.
Right, but like, and the other again, what's her name? His ultimately the person that Eli is coupled with, and her sisters. These are the first. These are their first times seeing this type of Sphinx-like character too. It came out of her body, but because she carried it, they have more of an innate sense. But if they didn't carry it, I suspect that they would act the same way.
One
It's
hundred percent.
like it's kind of very interesting to see that because we gravitate towards them because they're so, oh, they're community, they're diverse, they're that thing. But you can see the same kind of biases and prejudices and, things kind of play out. They kind of learn to look past it. Again, that adaptability that we're talking about, but it was there. And I don't want us to not see that because I think that Blake and Eli, their arrogance and their will are two sides of the same coin. I'm always gonna say that because he thought he can contain it. You can't contain something like this.
Yeah,
You should have just died. I know the organism won't let you, but you should have just died.
yeah,
And then Blake, he's the obvious choice of I hate. He's the obvious hate train.
sure.
So I get that. And then the third one was the play on the biblical names that I pointed out. And I'm trying to see if she's going to do something with that or if that's what she just chose to name them. So, how Eli, his sons, they run amok. He was the prophet. He was supposed to spread good word and like get people to, follow and honor God. He did that, but his sons ran amok. So that smite his whole entire family had to die. So that lineage was gone.
Y'all,
And that's how Samuel came along.
y'all
But
know that Butler is working out her religious.
she is her church hurt. Yeah, we get it. I just wanted to know if she was going to, do something with that. And we all know Jacob, he who wrestled with God and lived to tell about it. He became Israel. I want to know if she's going to do something with it.
Well, we in the book next week.
Okay.
We in the book next week. You were saying something. I wanted to say something before we move on. Okay, so one thing that I want us to understand, because I'm not too sure if it says this in Pattern Master, but the reason why these clay art beings are able to leverage the playing field is because you have to be fully human for a patternist to read your mind and change it. If you're not fully human, then you're a match for me because I cannot take you out of here by doing some type of telepathic trick. Okay. So once they fully become, and this is something that I don't think is said in the book, but I know from the background, once you fully become a clay arc, you cease to be human. You still have the human image, but you cease to be human. And then therefore, that's why you're able to produce a Sphinx character or a clay arc, right? And so when we get to the tension of the next book, when we get to Pattern Master, you'll be able to understand why the clay arcs have the leverage that they have. It's because they're no longer human. So by the time we get there, we're not dealing with Eli's, we're dealing with Jacob and his folks. Okay? So just keep that in mind. Okay. Melo. They say you got bad service, girl. Every time I come back to you. Okay. Hey, you here? You may have to get off and come back on. I don't know. Anybody else want to say anything while we wait?
I just wanted to add to Tachi's point, the connection between the incest with Doro and the incest in this book. Doro was treating humans like animals, right? Animals will mate with their children, right? In this book, she's depicting them as becoming animalistic. So they're going to do the same thing. So that would be the connection I saw, at least.
I didn't think about that. Yeah, he was breeding them as animals, and yeah. And I also think, like, when I think about like the scarcity, right? Tai Chi was talking about sharing one man, if them sharing Eli. I mean, we see that even in the Bible with Lot's daughters, who y'all know what they did. They not to say impregnate their father. They sleep with their father because they have to leave Sodom and Gomorrah, and then they get pregnant. And so I think that sharing of a man until another man becomes available, it just shows what you would do in survival. Right? I saw a podcaster say this, and he said if you put 100 women on an island with one man, you may repopulate that island in a few years. If you put one woman on the island with 100 men, there's going to be a war, right? And so I think that two women, one man thing works in that way, and in a way that it wouldn't work two men, one woman. Melo, you back? I don't know what's going on with you.
Can I add something quickly?
Yes.
One of the distinctions that I noticed, and I wrote it in the chat, Kira, when she was confronted with the other being, Jacob, she opened her heart and connected spirit to spirit. She didn't let the difference.
This is insane.
Melo, we can hear you.
Oh, are you there? I'll jump off. That's
No.
it.
Wait.
Okay, great. Okay, listen, I'm on a bullet train back to Tokyo. This has been the most. First off, anyway, welcome. I missed y'all so much. I have so many thoughts because I finished Survivor. I finished the whole series because I didn't want to take my big book with me or bring my big book with me. So I hated Survivor. I'm here in Clay's arc with y'all. My thoughts underneath this train. As soon as I get here, there's a tunnel. I think that the point that Butler was trying to make was around, like you said, hierarchy and what we do intelligently. And the thing that resonated with me the most is that we kept coming back to our base levels, particularly with the daughters. I don't remember their names. It's been like weeks now. The daughter who was like, I gotta get out. The leukemia daughter, that's a horrible way to say it. The leukemia daughter who was, I think she was the closest to human that we had, or like what we consider like a normal good human. And that's because she had a disability. Something about marginalization allows you to be fully understanding and compassionate. Whereas the other daughter was like, no. And their dad was a terrible man. We've already talked about it. No need to rehash. And so when we bring into the world the virus, like we had said earlier, it does show us who we are. And I do think that Butler, part of transformation is recognizing who you are and going through that. And particularly with the Clay's Arc virus, seeing the ways in which we engage with ourselves when we are having to survive is very indicative of who we actually are outside of the confines of like society. The other thing is, particularly when it comes to the virus, I do like to think of it as a network. When you said that, Valerie, I think it was Valerie, that's a good point. The other thing about that virus is like the incessant need, the innate need to spread, because nothing about humans is innate. I had to learn this the hard way. Something I read that like we are not biologically innate. Like animals, they're maternally innate because through evolution, but because we had to adapt to the confines, not the confines, but like to exist as people, we don't have any innate traits that carry from person to person. And the only thing that ties the Clay Arc together is that virus. And I thought that was so fascinating because this is like for the first time in humanity's like history, we are doing something that we have to do and we have to share it. And finally, the other thing was, I think that Eli, the guy who had the virus, is an example of what it means to care in spite of, because he did his best. He should have died, but obviously he couldn't because innate trait.
Uh-oh. She jumped. I think we dropped her signal.
And only spread the virus minimally.
Dropped out.
And even then, because that white man, I think he was white, the dad, is still a human with no innate, like, we have to care for each other. He went on about his business like, I couldn't help it, I scratched him. And like, I think, this is my opinion, Eli is what would happen if we had stayed more human and less, oh, you can do what you want, you have free will. And this gets into a conversation we can have around like what actually free will is and whether or not it exists. And I'm going to say it doesn't, because your choices that you make are kind of like Do they exist? Do they not? And then we know it's not true because that guy did not have a choice. He had to do the thing. And he fought back in his version of free will. He fought back against this virus that was forcing him to do something. And he was fighting the good fight. These are my thoughts. These are my thoughts.
Thank you for your thoughts. You cut out for 1 second, but we got the gist of what you were saying. I do like that you brought up the fact that Eli fought the fight, right? He fought the good fight of faith, right? Because he was a missionary. He fought the good fight of faith. But I also think we see this black man policing himself. Y'all don't forget, Eli's black. And so you see this black man trying to police himself, but also stay in line. Yeah. And so that creates to me, it creates a different experience with Eli. I think that's one of the reasons why we cannot really hate him, because you see him steadily trying to keep himself in line or police himself or, be the moral standard of the text. Still, he fails, but not because of him, but because of Blake, because of a white man, right? I think that's something that we should consider as well. Benji's mom, you were saying something. I'm sorry that we cut you off. Benji's mom, you want to hop back in? She may have stepped away from the phone. Oh,
Sorry.
hey, Benji.
I kind of finished it, but it struck me that Kira connected heart to heart. And I wondered if that was a reminder that if we let go of differences and open our hearts and engage with another, that can be a bridge. I just saw that. The others couldn't get past the difference, but she did. And it was just the opening of the heart. And I thought that was kind of, I don't know, a bridge, possibly.
I'm wondering if she was able to do that because she was, she had that disability, so she was able to recognize to connect with him on that level because she has a disability and she had a life-threatening illness.
And you can also see it, right? And so it's one thing to have a disability that's invisible. It's another thing to have a disability that is visible, that you're wearing on your body, on your person, that people can see. And so remember, in the first part of the book, Butler mentioned that Kira knew about ugly looks and disapproving stares. And she even commented that she was beautiful. She once looked like her mother, but now she looks otherworldly, right? And so I think that when bodies start to change, you will be able to connect with another person whose body is othered. So hers is othered by a sickness. Jacob's is othered by as a result of a sickness. Both of these things are out of their control, but they're still having to live with the consequences. They're still landing on the bodies of both of them. So, of course, as Malou says, marginalized people can have more empathy and sympathy for other marginalized groups. Why? Because you know what it feels like to be left out and marginalized. And one of the reasons why Blake did not survive is why? Because he does not know that life. And in the same way that what telepath had a struggle with Mary when he came into her world and he called her a green-eyed bee. Y'all know Jesse. In the same way that Jesse struggled, white male, to be under the leadership of a black woman, is the same way that that Blake is struggling to be under the leadership of a black man, but also understand that his body's about to change too. Another thing on bodies. Okay, what you got?
Y'all hear me? Fantastic. 2 minutes or less. Okay, so I was just gonna say, because we talked about white parents and like why they're not maternally adept. No shade, Christy, but tea. Anyway, speaking of Blake and his inability to
You gone.
Be led, what we see is also like tying into religion. We talked about the names, but what we did not talk about was the fact that there is a fervor that is associated with your belief system and the incorruptibility, or like the in, like I will not shake it, and how that leads you. Like, like pride goes before the fall. When you are so set in your mind, because we saw it with them blue animals, when you were so set in your mind that you were inscrutably like unmovable, that like forces you, I won't say forces, it's a canon event, and typically 99% of the time it fails. So we see it with Blake. He was so sure about like, I need to get free, I need to get free, I need to go, and like he denied the truth. His reality was, oh, even though I'm a doctor, even though I know what I'm talking about, even though I am seeing the symptoms, I'm going to go and spread this virus because I refuse to believe. Also, the child, who I still can't remember her name, she was the same way of like, I need to get gone. And I think back to the point about white people, no shade, Christy, but all tea, is that when confronted, especially in an apocalyptic event or the end of a thing, or people from a place of privilege, when confronted with the end of a thing and having to navigate that, you tend to, which is what happens, cause collateral damage. What I have not heard in the minutes that we've been on is the collateral damage, the impact. At the very end, Eli was like, well, we need to shelter. We need to like plan ahead. And I think that is always so interesting in these types of stories of like, you are causing the exact thing you wanted to prevent because you could not see past yourself. And because you cannot see past yourself and your beliefs, you are now impacting everyone else. And it's like a ripple effect. And then also with that, knowing that even at the best of his ability, this black man who did his best still wasn't good enough to combat a privilege, a white person, whatever. So that the world that he was trying to protect and create happened. Now, I have my thoughts about black men and protections and so on and so forth. But it still wasn't good enough. And so if we go back to the conversation around innate and the this is the one time in our human history that we are actually getting to choose, because he got to choose to say no to this virus or do it on his own terms. Because for the most part, we think we do things on our own terms, but we typically don't. And he still could not combat the exact thing. Now, here's an opportunity for Doro. Doro's hierarchy of like being like, the worst of the worst and wanting to exemplify that, I think, actually, no, I'm going to say this because I read.
We appreciate you. Lactose intolerant, I saw you sounding off in the chat. You said Eli is still, you ain't for him. What you got?
Yeah. I mean, he admits himself, in one of the little flashbacks that like he knows it's inevitable that it's going to get out. Yet he still tries to keep his little compound in control. And to me, that just reads as selfishness, is very much like Doro, right? Like, I got to keep my little group and breed them, and then we'll be fine if we just stay isolated. Which clearly he also knew wasn't going to happen. And so then in defense of Blake, right? Like, he's been raised with all of this institutional and experiential knowledge that informs him that, I'm a doctor and I can help heal people. Then he's randomly kidnapped by people who seem to want to do him violence, held captive for a couple of days, or not even a couple of days, it seems like only a night. But he's supposed to like suddenly accept everything they're telling him and all of their beliefs and be like, oh gosh, no, you're right. Totally, an extraterrestrial organism cannot possibly be cured and we have to stay here. Like, it seems I don't know, ridiculous. Like, if he had been held there maybe months and months, I could feel that argument, but it's like such a short period of time. There's not enough like time for them to develop trust with these characters. There's not time enough for him to like learn enough about the organism to be convinced that it couldn't be cured. So he's just doing what he thinks is the most ethical thing, to get out, find help, and find a way to stop this thing from spreading even farther. And like, I think about these historical connections, right? Like, the plague did not just stay in one European country. Like, HIV did not just affect the gay community. COVID did not just stay in China. Like, we have historical knowledge even then that these diseases spread. But the sooner that we could science at them, right, maybe the sooner it could be controlled and contained. And so like Eli's desire to, like, I get he doesn't want to be like kept in a cage or a lab thing, and I get that, but like that was his moral failing. Like, he should have taken that taken that kind of loss, and if he actually cared about humanity. But instead he does that Doro thing where he's like, let me breed my little family and then they have to stay near me, which I just find indefensible. And I think, like, yes, Blake was not a great character. Like, I didn't really like him. And I think he made a lot of poor choices, but I still kind of understand where he was coming from. If you plucked me off of the street and put a gun to my head and then was like, I've infected you with a magic disease from outer space, like, I wouldn't believe you either. Like, that sounds completely insane to me.
Point
Um,
taken.
yeah, that's all I got. Thank you.
I promise. I'm not gonna slow this.
So while I
This is very
get,
indicative of
so
a
hold on.
take
So
that
while
is
I
not
get,
like I don't I'm gonna say I disagree because if I see that what you're saying is somewhat based in truth, I absolutely would be like, well, let me sit down. But as a black woman, I like to listen. I like to perceive. And especially if you take this back 5 years to quarantine, like the beginning of COVID, people were like, we don't know, let us sit. And everybody's like, no, I'm gonna go outside. And as a doctor, I'm not hearing that for Blake. He doesn't know. You don't know, and you're still going to transport this thing that you don't know to be like, well, medically, and that's very indicative of the other nurses and
Okay,
the other
everyone
doctors
who's
who were
not
like,
speaking.
yeah, you could just don't believe. Well,
no,
if you
that's
think about like the actual medical professionals who were when confronted with this respiratory virus, they were like, and I'm not feeling that. Like Blake is giving very privileged take of, yeah, maybe there's a reason they're doing that. And I understand an alien organism could be lying to you, but you do not know that. And you would be better served thinking of your community outside of yourself and your, I need to check this, to be like, maybe they got a point. Maybe their child that's like a cat dog, maybe their excessive sweating and exorbitant amount of eating is for a reason. Maybe I should sit
Can you speak a little louder? The
even
man.
though I'm here, because though I'm a medical professional, this man is showing me superhuman strength. I've never seen before that does not do so much. So there must be some truth. But no, because I'm a white doctor, I'm gonna go outside.
Okay.
No.
Oh, she ain't supposed to be talking on train. Okay. Okay. I don't think we heard you fully, but we always appreciate your input. We couldn't hear you because the man was competing with you. The man who was announcing was competing with you. Some people heard you a little bit, but some people didn't get to hear what you said. But all right, Tai Chi.
Yeah, I was gonna say I disagree. I'm never gonna go that far to say Eli equals Duro. That's insane. And I don't think he had in, a bit, it wasn't, how can I say this? Doro's intent from the very beginning is that he thought he was God and he was going to breed people like animals. I think Eli is doing this out of survival. What I said was that Eli isn't completely innocent because instead of, kind of dying on the spaceship like everybody else did, he made his way, he survived, he wriggled out, and then the virus made him, do these things. But to say, I don't know, to say that Eli equals Doro is a bit much there. I'm going to respectfully disagree. Also, uh, with Blake and his magic backpack, that he was able to sit there and look at the organisms that, from Mita's blood and see that she was not lying and she wasn't telling the truth. I feel like more conversations had to be had. He noticed all of the things. He did a quick scan and a physical exam like we always do about what the symptoms are. And he thinks he can get them to a laboratory. Eli's telling him no. Now, I completely get where you're coming from with the held at gunpoint. Again, that was crazy. I'm going to give you that. Shouldn't have probably did that, and I probably wouldn't have trusted you either. But again, he had his little backpack, and he saw that what they were saying wasn't completely a lie. They're not in tinfoil hats, going around like making shit up. Like there's something that's happening here. And I feel like if someone's telling you, hey, my wife was a scientist. We tried to do this. We tried to do that. I was one of the lost scientists as well on the ship. This is everything that happens. If you leave, you are going to spread the disease. This is how we spread. They're telling you things and they're volunteering information. I feel like at least the logical brain in me would want more information. Again, I understand the survival mode. I understand being held at gunpoint and you completely shutting down and be like, well, I don't trust this person because he needs to harm me. I understand all of that. So I can get from Blake's perspective why he wants to escape, completely natural. But I just think that there's a distinction that needs to be made here between Eli and Dora. A large distinction.
I wanna third that. I want to agree with them because I mean I never disliked Eli. From the moment he explained what was going on, I understood that as a host to an alien organism, you don't have any choices, right? And then we are talking about animalistic behavior. You're being controlled on many levels. So the best you can do is try to prevent the disease from spreading because he can't die. I mean, there was a gruesome scene where someone was being killed and they were in pain. I think a few people, and I want to describe it because it was horrible, but they should be dead, but they weren't dead because the organism kept them alive in that moment, right? So when you have something that's basically the body snatchers taking over, and controlling you to live, even when you shouldn't even be alive in a moment where your body has been damaged so significantly, how can you expect that person not to spread the disease and not because they can't die, but he did his best because he didn't go out into the cities. He didn't continuously kidnap people. It could have been far worse. He was in the desert for years, I think, at the point when Blake got there. Now Blake on the other hand was horrible because you heard what they were saying. Not only did you hear him explain it to you, you saw evidence. Your children saw evidence. That's what made me dislike his daughter even more because she saw even more evidence than her father and still wanted to leave knowing that she was going to spread the disease. In my opinion, I'm going to have to agree with my hate trained girlies. It was privilege. It was privilege.
So understood where everybody coming from. I think with lactose intolerant, I do think that her reasoning was fair. I'm not talking about the Eli one because I don't agree with that one, but I agree with the Blake one, right? The trust the science. You know what I'm saying? Mindset. And so if we were in our COVID years being told trust the science, I think that in Blake's to partner with what lactose intolerant was saying, he was trying to trust the science, right? Privilege, absolutely 100%, but being able to study science is privilege as well. Being able to be educated is a privileged position. I think that white privilege in that moment overruled logic or overruled, no, I can't even say survival because I think he escaped because of survival. I think he escaped because he felt that he knew better. And I think that we all do different things to survive, and survival instincts express differently in everyone. But y'all, can we let Doro die? He did.
No.
He was dead 2 books ago.
Yeah. Okay.
Why can't we let Doro?
Because he started it. It was the inception.
He didn't start the clay art disease.
There are parallels though between Doro and
he didn't
and the organism. There are definite parallels there. So he didn't really die, and he started the whole. I mean, this is centuries ago.
So who made Mary?
He's not even in this book.
Doro made Mary. Mary made Clay. Clay.
Doro made Clay, made Mary, made all of them in the pattern at first. Okay, this is a result. This is a result.
Yeah, he won't escape. He started it.
It's great.
No, you're reaping the generational seed of this. He sowed this.
Yes, Dora. Someone in the chat says Dora is the virus.
Dora opened the book for.
So Dora came back as the virus. You're not telling me.
Okay, so what I was gonna say about Eli, the one thing that I, when I read that book, that I thought about was when they were on this planet and they got infected. They at first were not going to try to come back home.
Sure.
The organism was so strong,
It drew him back.
and so it forced them to travel across the universe to come back because it knew we can spread crazy here, right? And I always had a thing with Eli saying, if everybody else died, why didn't you? Like, what did you do? And I don't know if his instincts were stronger or whatever else. He didn't die. He went through everything. The other thing about Blake is that in the book they talked about, how rare it was to have cars and all this kind of stuff, and that you had to be really privileged to have a car. Walsey, you basically had all this stuff, which means he could have traveled to see his the grandmother or whatever they were trying to do by flight.
Well, so I think in the book it said that she wanted to see it, and they were doing the scenic route because they thought she was about to die.
Yeah, okay. Again, you knew that you were walled off,
Sure.
and that you knew that there were all these, and you knew intimately because you were at these hospitals where there were sewer rats, and there were all of these other people who were like just beyond intolerable. You knew that this was part of what was happening, but you put the safety of your two 16-year-old daughters in a car so you could see a scenic route. What's scenic? What you gonna see? If it's beyond the gate, beyond the door is crazy, and it can be crazy. Why would you put your children in that space? This is why Blake is evil as hell, and he's right there up there with Doro. That's why. Because like how are you not thinking about this?
I'm
I
trying to find in the book. Go ahead, y'all. Somebody.
No, I just have a chronology question, Dr. Whiteside. So I know we read Survivor before this one. So, and so I know that they went to two different planets. They went to the Cone planet, and they went to Proxima Centauri, where the virus was. But were both missions around the same time, or
No.
I felt like Proxima Centauri was before the Cone mission.
Yes, so there were multiple mission trips, multiple. The reason, so this, if we want to read it with Clay's arc in mind, this would have come, Survivor would have come after Clay's arc. It would have come
Okay.
after Pattern Master. And I think that the reason why I put it so far before Pattern Master is to kind of bridge the gap between the mutes and what they were thinking and what they were going through on Earth. Because this is the only not Pattern Master, what is it? Survivor is the only book that we get the mute story. What really happened. And so because what were Elena's parents' names? Whatever their names were, because they were able to tell us what happened as a result of them being property of Mary, and also give us more background information before we meet the Clay's arcs. That's why I put it there. But if you want to look at this in terms of the mission itself and when their ship went to space, it will come after Pattern Master.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So just keep that in mind, y'all. I was looking for something that somebody said, but then I forgot. I can't find it in the text. We got 1 minute. We ain't get to no questions, and that's fine. What y'all? Anybody got any closing thoughts? Let's go there. Any closing thoughts? Yes, the book was
I'm
brutal.
excited. No, I was gonna say I'm excited about Pattern Master because I read the blurb, and I saw that it was a battle between the Clayarchs and the Patternists, and I'm really excited about that. So
Yeah, and y'all, this is the first book that Butler ever published. So if the writing feels different, she was a junior writer, and I'm just gonna leave it there because it feels different. I think Pattern Master is a shorter book too, but I did want us to read it over 2 weeks anyway. But just keep that in mind. That is her first published work. This is the book that all of the other books that we've read were built out of or from. It is the foundation of the Patternist series. And this is a terrible read. And be prepared to kind of grapple with some stuff. I also want to encourage y'all, probably after you read the first section, skim that article that I published on Survivor about the Afronaut, because there are some points in there where I want you to, Butler doesn't hyper focus on mutes or people with non-telepathic communities. They're like sprinkled throughout, but there's a part in the article, I may just republish the section that I'm referring to. I think that'll probably be easier, because it'll show you that they're still dealing with the effects of patternist enslavement in this distant future. So we did go to the future a little bit in Clay's arc, but now we're in the distant future when we get to Pattern Master. Okay. Yeah, so that is when we're going to meet the Patternist and the Clay's arc, and it's going to be all tied up in a pretty bow. So, any questions, y'all?
I have a question.
Okay.
Okay. Actually, I want to say thank you so much for doing this. I love this. This is one of the highlights of my week. My family knows it's Wednesday. Do not bother me. Secondly, nobody's going to say anything to offend me. Even if I'm the only white person in here, I get it. White people, I know. So I understand.
You know,
And
in the Club
third,
We All family.
I'm sorry.
In the Club We All family.
Yeah. Third, what if, since they're talking about TikTok potentially going away, that's my question. Where do we go in case
Right.
we're not here next
So
week?
if we're not here next week, go to the Substack. I have free Zoom, the paid version of Zoom. I will drop a Zoom link in the chat where I always say, hey, here's the live information, or the live link. So go ahead and do that. And then I think I can go live on YouTube, but I need to go live through Zoom on YouTube so that the panel can show up.
Okay.
So if we're not here, go to the chat on the Substack, or I will send out a specified email with the Zoom link that we joined on Zoom. So if you're not on the Substack, just search Dr. Brianna Whiteside and click subscribe to the Substack. Okay. So if we're not here, we're going to meet on Zoom, but we're going to keep going. Okay.
Okay, because I don't want to miss any of this.
No. Thank you for saying that, because I meant to say that. I thought about it earlier, but then it slipped my mind when we got into all of this.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, y'all. So I'll see y'all next week. Of course, the questions will drop tomorrow on Pattern Master, and I'll do my best to. I don't got to bridge nothing because we've been in the world for a long time. So I'll see y'all next week and on the Substack tomorrow. Good night.
Bye bye.
See you. Good night.